전국에서 가장 유능한 디베이터들이 모이는 대회이긴 만큼 경쟁이 치열하긴 하겠지만 결과에 치중한다기보다는 그 과정에서 제가 얻는 성취감과 또 새로 사귀는 친구들에 대한 기대감이 크고요. 또 그래도 잘 해서 이겼으면 좋겠습니다.
오늘 총 4개의 예선전이 진행이 되게 되고요. 그 4개 예선전을 통해서 다음 주 토요일에 이제 저희가 본선이 또 진행이 되게 됩니다. 그래서 4개 예선전을 모든 팀이 다 참가를 하게 되고요. 거기에서 얼마나 많은 승수를 챙겨가느냐에 따라서 본선 진출 여부가 결정이 됩니다.
파이팅!
안녕하세요. 광주고등학교 1학년 소피스입니다. 우승 그!
저희 상황팀 소피스트가 이긴다고요? 말도 안 되는 소리. KUF 파이팅!
But ladies and gentlemen, to a baby as they grow on. And that's exactly why
parents that are distributed
tendency to lose control of her or him. Very important for babies or juveniles that are simply impossible for these people to respond. Only on that point, the amount of attention is different. It's a clear assumption.
Low income, crime, and mental illnesses. Mr. and Mrs. Speakers, just about every negative factor in the society today seems to be caught up in a vicious cycle. And we believe that this is the exact essence of the motion that we're going to be debating today, about the motion that this House would allow criminally charged parents to raise babies behind bars. We are saying that through our policy, we'll be able to stop this vicious cycling from continuing, and we are going to prove to you today by our 3 arguments that we will be the ones that will be addressing this problem right. As the Prime Minister, I will do mainly 3 things. First, define the few key terms in this debate. Second, explain about our policy. And lastly, explain about our first 2 substantive arguments. The third argument will be explained by our Deputy Prime Minister. Now, before moving on to our arguments, I would first like to define a few key terms of the debate. The first term will be criminally charged parents. These people are parents proven guilty by law and parents who will be staying in prisons. And by raising babies, we mean that the parents will be financially and emotionally supporting the babies. And by behind bars, we mean, of course, in prison. Now, our policy today is that only if parents are financially and emotionally capable, of course, the parents' emotional status will be determined by the experts in the field of psychology and experts in the field of parenting. And if they have a strong determination to keep the baby, to be with the baby, the government would create an establishment for babies to stay in. Now, we will collect fees from the parents because it is costly. And however, if the baby grew up to be a legitimate age to earn public education, they will have to leaving the prison. Now, this will only apply in cases in which there aren't any legitimate parents outside of jail who can keep the baby. Now, our 3 arguments are first, parents' rights and responsibility. Second, that the policy is desirable for babies. And thirdly, the benefits to the prison and the government. Now, I would like to move on to explain about our first argument about the parents' rights and responsibility. From the moment a baby is born, parents gain not only the right, but also the responsibility and the obligation to raise and nurture the child. Just because one has committed a crime, it does not mean that they should be deprived of all the rights one owes, especially in the case in which it involves the raising of a child, which would be detrimental to the child's life also. Now, even if others are to say that people should all rights if it's necessary, we believe that the responsibility still remains. Parents do have a responsibility to take care of the child. It is only right that the government supports this through their policy. Now, because we will determine the emotional status of the parents through experts in psychology and parenting, we will be able to practically addressing the problem. Now, we already see this happening in the status quo. For example, in the example of United States, 8 states have already allowed nurseries to be built inside prisons, and more states are currently considering building nurseries inside prisons. Now, this is proven to be effective because while one of the main goals of the prison is rehabilitation, we have seen that in cases of normal prisons, people actually have a recidivism rate of 47%, but we see this is decreased to 15% in the cases of jails that have acquired the nurseries for growing children. And also, given the statistics that say children who grew without parental influence are 7 times more likely to commit serious crimes than a typical child who grew up with parents, we believe that this policy will be successfully addressing the problem of cutting the vicious cycle of ongoing crime. And now, moving on to our second argument about the desirability of the babies. We believe that this policy is desirable to the babies, mainly because if we weren't to implement this policy, the child is alone from the very beginning of his life. And this is exactly why we need to let parents raise babies behind bars, because babies require affection and interaction with their parents, ladies and gentlemen. That's not what should be promoted. It's what is actually required for babies at a young stage of life. Babies require affection. Babies require interaction with parents, ladies and gentlemen. And this is proven through various studies that involve parenting and psychology. This is not the only case which we should consider, because there will be cases in which people who've grown without parents commit crime but go without being caught. And there will be cases in which growing without parents will be shown in a different way other than committing crimes. For example, in depression or psychological disorders permanently damaged from not being able to spend their young age without parents. Now, we as the government are saying that we need a policy to step in and stop this abuse cycle. It's not a benefit to be promoted, ladies and gentlemen. It's something that we must take care of, ladies and gentlemen. This is a vicious cycle. This is the key to the social inequality that is so problematic today. By acquiring this policy, we will be able to solve problems like high crime rates. We will be able to solve inequality. And therefore, because of all these reasons, we believe that this policy would stand, and we believe that this House would allow criminally charged parents to raise babies behind bars.
First of all, before going on to any kind of rebuttals or the constructive points that I would like to present before the House, I would like to first point out the few key points that the team proposition has neglected from the duty in the very first part of the Prime Minister's speech. They have mentioned about how the raising baby behind bars would have a standard, well, a policy that experts on psychology or children bearing would decide on whether these parents would be apt to raise their children or not. Well, first of all, we would like to say that there is no clear standard on which is apt parents or not. So in order to make this debate more clear and concise, the team proposition has the obligation to clearly state what kind of standard they have for which parent is apt for raising children. It will be very vague upon who will raise the children and how the decision process will be made. Now, before going on to our team's
proceed.
No, thank you. Before going on to our team's two constructive points about harms for the babies and the social morals, and what the third speaker will talk about will be the parental matters, I would like to first refute to the first 2 points that team proposition has made in the previous speech. Their first argument was that parents have a rights and a responsibility, and just because they have committed a crime doesn't mean that they should be deprived from their rights. Like, first of all, they should be proving how freedom to access should be denied in prison, but the right to raise children is somehow different from this and should be given to the parents, even though they are a criminal.
On that point, sir.
And first of all, and also, they say that this is a matter of responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, these people are criminals. These people have been convicted guilty by our court, which means that they have already deprived the social morals or the responsibility that the society has given to us. And also, we would like to say that social justice has an obligation to send out a social message that some rights or some freedom or even some responsibility should be deprived from prisoners who have already made themselves aloof from such matters. And they have also mentioned how rehabilitation is an important matter, and we agree. However, we believe that they're claiming about raising babies behind bars does not relate to this. What they have mentioned is that there was great decrease in making crimes for these parents who have raised their babies behind bars. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, this policy is a very new one. It hasn't been even 10 years, and if we consider such short duration of policy, then it would be impossible for these people to decide whether this has been a sufficient rehabilitation or not, because the time in the aftermath of this policy has not been shown as well. They have also mentioned of how children grown without parents have 7 times more possibility of crime rates. Now they're contradicting themselves, because in their policy, what they have mentioned is that if babies are not raised behind bars, then they will be given to legitimate parents. Legitimate parents, even though not biological parents, they are also parents, which means that their logic about 7 times more crime rates is rather insufficient and illogical in the first place. And the second argument about children's benefits, they say that from the beginning of their life, they will be alone and they will be lacking interaction. However, this is not true. What they have said to us is that even in the status quo and even in their policy, if children are blocked from their parents because of their criminal behavior, then these children are given to legitimate parents. And we believe the government should be doing a better job than their policy of giving parents more legitimate and more fit parents instead of criminal parents who have already showed lack of responsibility. And also, let's say that their policy makes these children go with their parents until preschool, and these children have been interacting with their parents until like 4 or 5 years. But if the parent does not go out of the prison, then the child will be separated from their parents with whom they have identified as the parents. Rather than that, we would like to rather give more legitimate parents from the very first time of their life to the end of their life, so that they would have more of a considerate and consistent parentage. Having that, I'd like to go on to our team's first argument, which is harms to the children. We believe that children are bound to grow in unstable environments if their policy is implemented. The safety of the babies in concern, and the facilities or the education of babies are also in concern. Even before preschool, such matters are very important for babies or juveniles that are growing up. And that was what was lacking from the team government's policy about how this would be implemented, what facilities would be made, and what programs would be provided for the parents who are raising babies behind bars. And we believe that because of the inherent environment, there is a trait of being restricted from outdoor activities. These babies cannot always be with parents, since parents have to do some activity with the regular program. And also, we believe the constant care by the parent is unavailable as well. This means a very unstable environment. We're not even giving these parents we shouldn't be even giving these parents like full time with the babies, since that's against the general prisons rule. But we can also just take them away according to their policy. No matter how good the facilities should be, and no matter how good their policy would be implemented, such traits are inevitable, and we believe that would detrimentally harm the baby's socialization and education as well. Now, I'd like to then go on to our team's second argument about the social morals. Well, it is very important that these prisoners' parents, according to their definition, are already proven to be guilty, which means that they have done something wrong against the social morals and against the legal system in our society. And we would like to say that these prisoners should be punished, and part of that punishment, especially for conviction in prison, is that severing social connections, which means that if we are implementing this policy, then we're unfairly reducing punishments in terms for these prisoners compared to other prisoners, or compared to the general social norm that we have nowadays. This would be also unfair for other prisoners in confinement, because they would be having better environment program, and this would be clearly be unfair to other prisoners, because just because these prisoners have children would be making them have a better status or better environment within the prison. So the point I would like to make is that this policy is neither helpful for the babies, nor for the environment and the society as well. Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, babies need their parents and parents need their babies. Is there any idea that's more obvious and true than that? It's because in a parental relationship, the baby and the parent is involved in a special bond of affection, of care, of attention and trust. That's why the parental care becomes a part of the identity of that child, part of themselves as they grow on. And that's exactly why statistically, when children grow up without parental care, they tend to commit 7 times more juvenile crimes in their teenage age, and the recidivation rate for prisoners who are separated from their babies is the recidivation rate is significantly higher compared to those who were in contact with the babies in the nurseries in prison. And for these reasons, we'd like to allow prisoners who are prisoner parents to take care of their babies behind bars. And as the Deputy Prime Minister, I'd like to do two things for you in my speech. First of all, I'd like to rebut the arguments made by the opposition, and secondly, move on to elaborate our argument how our policy is even beneficial for the government and prison as a whole. So without further ado, let's move on to the rebuttals. First of all, the leader of opposition came up to the podium and questioned our standards because our policy was vague. Ladies and gentlemen, we certainly don't think this is the case because we clearly mentioned that parents who are only financially and emotionally stable and capable of affording the prisoner nursery fees would be allowed to raise babies behind bars. And psychological professionals and experts would determine which parents are really emotionally stable that wouldn't impose a negative influence on their child. If a parent is to be a rapist or someone with a pathological psychology, which is determined to have a detrimental effect on their child, they certainly would be excluded by the medical diagnosis done by these experts. And also they say proper retribution won't take place because the criminals has forfeited their rights to freedom, and therefore somehow automatically they also forfeit their parental rights to take care of children. We think this is preposterous because there is no logical link in between. They're serving their cost of crime because they have gave up their freedom to stay behind the bars, but they haven't forfeited their rights and duties to take care of babies and become a responsible parent. They're already serving justice by forfeiting their freedom. We say consider the rights of the babies and the parents as a whole to keep and protect their special relationship for the benefits of the society in the future. And they're automatically assuming just because a parent is a criminal, they're going to become unfit, unqualified to become a parent. But ladies and gentlemen, to a baby, even a criminal parent is also a parent. And we don't really know if their crime was malignantly done or not. And if that was to be the case, that will be determined by the medical experts as we proposed in our policy. But if it's not, we say it's totally irrelevant with the parental ability or the bond they can provide to their children, which is so vital to keep the family connections between the families in our society. And also, we believe prisons are established for the purpose of rehabilitation as well. And according to the statistics, the nursery program is serving this purpose very well because in Ohio, in Nebraska, and all of the several other states that's being implementing this policy shows a significantly reduced recidivation rate of parents committing crimes again when they're closely entitled with their babies, in contrast to cases where they were separated. And also to the point that this has only been implemented for 10 years, we point out that's factually untrue because starting from the 1970s, the United States has been implementing this policy in their 8 state prisons, and it has been proven to be gigantically successful, showing significantly reduced recidivation rates and more emotionally stable babies. So we think it's beneficial for both parties as well. And we'd like to also clarify on one point that they have misunderstood on the legitimate parents. We said that when both parents, the mother and the father, are both in prison, that's the case when the baby would be raised behind bars. If the mother or the father is not in prison and is living his own social life, then we say it's fine to leave it with that parent because that's also a form of legitimate parental care. But if both parents are unable, in cases of single moms or single parents, if none of the parents are able to provide the bond, the parental care that the babies need, then we say that's when our policy needs to take place for the benefits of the parents and the babies as a whole. And also, we told you that the facilities in status quo are already established in forms of nurseries and being run by the government. Yes, go ahead.
So what is your exactly significant difference between a biological parent and a legitimate parent that would be outside the cells?
We never differentiated between a biological parent and a legitimate parent. We think a biological parent is a legitimate parent that should be providing the parental care to the baby, who can provide the special bond that is vital for protecting a family. And if both a father and a mother is unable to do that, then they should be able to do that even behind bars, because that's important for our society. And also, it's not depriving the rights of the babies and the parents as a whole. So with all that answered, let's move on to the third argument, how allowing parents to raise babies behind bars would be also beneficial for the government and the prison as a whole. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we think this point is rather obvious because it improves the stability, the comfort for prisoners so that they don't misbehave. They have to behave responsibly because they're with their babies. And it also assists their psychological rehabilitation. As statistics show in Ohio, the recidivation rate of parents behind bars has decreased from 38% to 3%. In cases of Washington and Nebraska, it's each 47% decrease to 15%, 50% decrease to 16.8%. And we see this is a significant reduction in such malignant behaviors of parents, and their attitudes of before they were in prison and out of prison have both improved. Why? Because they were able to stay intimate with their beloved child, which were mutually able to provide the connection, the care that the babies and the parents both required for. So this is also, in the long run, beneficial for the prisons and the government and the nation, because we have more responsible prisoners in prison, and even when they come out, they're less likely to commit crimes because they were psychologically assisted by their babies for rehabilitation, which is one of the main purposes that we have prisons in the first place. And for all these reasons, we're extremely proud to propose.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as the second speaker of Team Opposition, before moving on to any further of my speech, I'd like to clarify a few points about the status quo. So, in the status quo, what happens when a baby is left behind, is left without any parents? As Team Proposition has been mentioning, when their both parents are being sent to prison, in most cases, they are sent to illegitimate parents. In other ways, in many cases, they're sent to foster families and then raised in those families. So, what Team Opposition finds problematic in today's debate is that Team Proposition hasn't proven to us why it has to be biological parents, even though given the fact that these biological parents have been criminals, have been ex-criminals, and still have a great possibility to be reconvicting. Yes, they said that it has been reduced to 15% in some states. We appreciate their example, yes. There might be a reduction in parents committing the same crime again in a few years after being sent out from prison. However, what we find very problematic is that these babies are being endangered, need protection from these parents because they have a great possibility to be harmed. And that's why we're opposing to this motion and saying that the status quo is much more better for the babies and for the whole society as a whole. I'd like to give some rebuttals that Team Proposition has been giving out today's debate. So first of all, to our LO's argument that there are some problems with their standards. They didn't have a clear standard. The DPM came up to the podium and responded that, well, we're going to determine whether the parents, the criminals, are financially and emotionally capable to support the babies. First of all, financial. Team Opposition finds it very, very problematic because just because a criminal doesn't have enough finance, and in fact, that many criminals are in poverty, just because they do not have enough money and giving away the right.
For your information.
No, thank you, sir. Taking away their right to raise the children, we find it very unfair and very prejudicial. And second of all, no, thank you, sir, about emotional. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very doubtful how actually we can determine whether a person is emotionally stable enough to care a baby. And also, it can be very unfair to other prisoners because just by the fact that they may not have enough money, just by the fact that at the moment when they were being tested, whether they're emotionally stable or not, just because that they were emotionally high, they're derived from this possibility of rights. We believe that this is very problematic. And second of all,
before you proceed,
no, thank you, sir. The DPM came up and said that, well, babies need their parents, and parents need their babies. First of all, babies need their parents. Yes, they need their parents. However, we like to question once again, why does it have to be biological parents? Even given the fact that legitimate parents, foster parents, can be much more better for these children.
Because.
Yes, sir.
Because legitimate parents, proven by statistics, don't pay the same attention or care, the special bond that the biological parent, which we believe to be the only legitimate parent, can provide.
Okay, so there could be a decreased rate of these ex-criminals to be convicting crime again. But as you have already mentioned before, there is a still high possibility that there will be negative effects to these babies. And second of all, what about the foster parents? They'll be giving much more better influence, better impact, and better work to these children in the future. No, thank you, ma'am. And also, about the parenting rights. They said that, well, these parents have their rights to raise their children. Just because they're criminals, it doesn't mean that they haven't taken away their rights to raise their children. However, ladies and gentlemen, Team Opposition strongly believes that rights follow after responsibilities. Ladies and gentlemen, these criminals, no thank you, sir, have given up and did not fulfill their responsibilities as a social member. That's the very reason why they were sentenced to jail. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the very reason why I believe that, no thank you, sir, in certain cases, we have to take away certain parts of their rights. And also, we find it very problematic because some criminals may not have their babies. And just by the fact of that, they are being prejudiced and no thank you, ma'am. They are being in unfair status in the same prison, even though the two have been somehow done the same crime. And we believe that that is very unfair. No, thank you, sir. And thus, the criminals with babies, they do not have more rights than the other prisoners who do not have babies. And also, they said that parents will be responsible more in their jails because they have their babies. First of all, our first response is that it's also, at the same time, it's unfair for certain people who do not have babies. And second of all, also we have all repetitively mentioned, it has a negative impact. As our LO has been already explained through his speech, his 7-minute speech, it's going to have negative impacts to these children, and therefore we strongly oppose to this motion and say that the current status quo is much more better. And last but not least, I would like to explain our team's third substantive point, which is about practicality. Ladies and gentlemen, besides all of the values and all of the issues given out throughout the debate, we'd like to question whether this is really possible or not in the first place. They said that they're going to ask for payments from these criminals for the nurseries. However, ladies and gentlemen, how many people, how many criminals will be able to pay for this? And second of all, then what about the others who cannot pay for it? It's very unfair for them. And therefore, in order to solve this problem, the government would have to build all those nurseries and all those institutions by their own fees. And therefore, this is a very big cost, and it's going to be very impractical. And for these reasons, our team strongly opposes. Thank you.
Today's side opposition today seems to misrepresent the case of side proposition, because we've said clearly throughout our 3 substantive case and as the last speech, we're going to tell you today, and we have successfully told you today about how legitimate parents can only be the biological parents in the case of criminals and babies behind the bars. We've told you successfully in today's debate how mainly in the case of values and justification, how in the first in the values and justification, second in the issue and harms of benefits, and third about the standards and practicality, we have taken today's debate. So now let's take a look at the 3 criteria, or the 3 analyze the 3 main issues of today's debate one by one. The first issue of value and justification. We're going to analyze this issue into mainly different entities. The first entity that we're going to look across this is about the parents themselves. We told you from the very beginning that the parents have the responsibility when it comes to babies behind bars. We told you that when a parent commits the crime, it doesn't really justify the fact that the individual is giving up all of the responsibility that they have in a society. We told you that we still have the parents still have the responsibility to take care of the babies that they have, because they are still biologically attached to these babies. We've also told you that in the case of No, sir. In the case of criminals, the government should be supporting these criminals, or in other words, parents, because they still exist as a parent in today's society. On the next issue, we've told you about the second entities of babies. We've told you that the babies, because they're going to be alone in society if we don't let them be behind their bars, that they're going to be alone in society from the start of their life. The response that we've heard from side opposition today was the fact that these legitimate parents and actual biological parents are different. We gave you several responses. The first response that we've told you is that the legitimate parents and the biological parents are very different in terms of attention. We've proven to you this by giving you crime rates or psychological experts, quotes from psychological experts, that this really isn't the case. But more importantly, we've also shown you that in cases of legitimate parents, we think that they don't emotionally have an interaction with the babies, which is important for not only the perspective of the criminals, but also the babies themselves. Because the babies need the attachment at this age where they are developing, and the development is in great need. And so, because we've proven to you the special bond between the biological parents and babies through crime rates and psychological evidence as well, we think that we take the first clash of values and justification to side proposition. But secondly, on the issue of harms and benefits, the only harm that side opposition brought up to you today was about the harms to the children, about how babies can't go outdoor, how they can't socialize with others. But we would like to still respond to this by saying that because our policy clearly states that the babies only under the age of school is going to be behind the bars. We've told you that when they pass the age of when they can go to school, we're going to let them go out of jail and socialize whatsoever in the outside society. So we think that was an invalid point for their side of the house. The benefits, on the other hand, that we've brought to you by proposing this policy was, number one, a decrease of crime rates. We've told you that numerous times, and it's proven to you by statistics that the percentage is going down by 38-3, 47-16% in Washington, and so on in other different states. We've clearly shown this, which was never rebutted from side opposition. And another thing that we've talked about in today's debate was about the unfairly reducing retribution of the prisoners. They've told you that it's going to be unfair for the other prisoners in the jail because it's going to be somehow a privilege for the people and the criminals to deal with their own babies. They called it an opportunity. We think different because we simply think that when a parent is in jail and she or he needs to take care of that baby, it's not an opportunity they have because they're better than other criminals in jail, but a responsibility they need to take because they are the biological parents of the babies. And so this second issue about harms and benefits also is taken by side proposition. But now the really important part of today's debate about the standards and practicality of today's debate. The first issue is about the unclear standards that side opposition tries to claim. They say that we have unclear standards because we don't have a clear standard from the beginning in our policy. We've clearly shown you through today's debate that parents who are financially and emotionally stable and judged by psychological experts to determine whether the parents are eligible and qualified to be contacted with their babies are the only ones who are going to be able to be with their babies in prison. We told you this because, number one, because the cost is very low, because most of the people can afford to have their babies in prison. But secondly, without this determination from psychological experts or by their financial or emotional condition, that we can't really we can't be really sure of whether these babies are able to be contacted and have a bad influence with the parents or not. That's why we gave you specific standards of why financially these people should be stable. But onto this, we've also told you that it's going to be very feasible, which they tried to point it out, because we told you that this is very feasible in terms of plans because it's been already implemented from 1970 in the United States. We've told you that 8 new states of the United States haven't implemented this already, which clearly shows the practicality of this issue as well. So because of all of these reasons, because we've told you the value of today's debate, the harms and benefits of today's debate, and the standards and practicality, which seems to be very valid and very solid in today's debate, we take this debate home. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, in today's debate, we see a lot of fabrication, and we have seen a lot of fabrication from team government. They're trying to fabricate these criminal parents as rational, ordinary parents through their policy of checking their emotional and financial situations. But whether or not they are rational or not, ladies and gentlemen, it is a certain fact that these parents are criminals, that these parents are harms to society, and we believe that because these parents are criminals, we're very doubtful about the effects, the parenting effects that they will have to their children, and thus we believe that we should oppose this motion. I have three major clashes in today's debate. The first, the aspect about the parents. The second, the aspect from the children. And lastly, the harms and benefits to society. Now let me move on to the first clash about the parents' rights. Now what they continuously say, ladies and gentlemen, in this clash was that parents have the responsibilities and thus they have the rights to nurture their children even if they go into the cells, the prison bars, ladies and gentlemen. But there is a very famous quote, ladies and gentlemen, that with rights follows responsibilities. We are very doubtful why the society should actually grant them these rights to nurture their children when they have not fulfilled the obligations, the responsibilities that the society has forced them to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we deal with criminals who are different from the normal law-abiding people. They should not be given the same amount of rights, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that their rights have the justification to be infringed. No, thank you. And we believe that in that case, there is no justification, no need for the society to actually grant them these rights that other normal law-abiding, tax-paying citizens are given. And if we are to give them these rights, ladies and gentlemen, they must have proven why. The significant effects, the grave positive effects that it can bring to our society, to the children and to the parents. But we have not seen why there is a great necessity to grant these rights, even when they are criminals not abiding the laws. And also, the second issue in this clash was whether the differences between a foster parent and a biological parent. We agree with their parenting effects, ladies and gentlemen. We agree that parents are important. But we are very doubtful why legitimate parents, why foster parents cannot serve the same roles as other ordinary biological parents. And in this case, biological criminal parents. No, thank you. It's clearly an assumption that the attention rate of foster parents and real biological parents are different because many people are actually living through adoption and living a very good life, ladies and gentlemen. And also, they have a very weird stance from the first place. Now, they say that parental influence is very important, but let's look at their policy very specifically. They say that they're going to let the parents nurture their children before they go to school. What this means is that after they become 7, the age to go to school, they will not receive any parental influence. No, thank you. That they will become isolated again. And how does this solve the problem that they have raised up continuously in today's debate? We think that their stance is first very shaky from the first hand. No, thank you. And also, we believe that parental influence, not only parental influence is important, but influences from the society is also important. And the ability to socialize is also important even before you attend school, ladies and gentlemen. It's not only important after you attend school, because if you do not learn how to socialize before attending school, it's actually harder for these children to adopt in a very new environment without their parents, which is a place called school, ladies and gentlemen. So we believe it's clearly harmful for both the parents and the children. Now moving on to the second clash about the child's perspective. And before I move on, yes.
Parental care is most important for babies. When they go to school, they aren't babies anymore because they're not in the youngest stage that parental care has the most significant influence on.
And we're saying that, ladies and gentlemen, that legitimate parents, foster parents, can give them the same amount of attention, same amount of care, the same amount of parental effects, ladies and gentlemen. They haven't differentiated why only biological parents can give those parental influences, ladies and gentlemen. And we also think that even if the kids become 7 or 8, they still need parental influence because that term of age is the period where they are most influential by other factors, by their environments, by their surroundings, which they have failed to notice. Now moving on to the second clash about the perspectives of the children. Now they keep on saying about the parental influences and that without biological parents, they are 7 times more likely to commit crimes. But again, I'd like to question whether they have actually differentiated the clear differences between a foster parent and a real parent. Why, if a foster parent cares for the children, they will actually commit more crimes? Because we believe that the parental effects they argue are very important and are also factual. We agree to that fact. But what we do not agree, ladies and gentlemen, is that those effects can only be brought out by the biological parents. And we have heard no single response, only a response that the amount of attention is different. We believe it's a clear assumption, ladies and gentlemen. No, thank you. And we have also told you about the issue of practicality of how it's going to be implemented, because there needs to be changes in the rooms, changes in the programs for these little children, because they won't be in the same situations as other hideous criminals, ladies and gentlemen. And also with that argument about the practicality, we have heard nothing from Team Proposition again. They just say that it's actually possible without actually inferring, without actually suggesting, no thank you, suggesting us of how it's going to be implemented, how the changes will be made, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe, and also even if these changes are made, we're very doubtful whether this will actually lead to positive influence to the children. But in the bars, ladies and gentlemen, in the prisons with other hideous prisoners, we believe that it's clearly different from a child who is nurtured at a normal environment, can clearly get the same amount of parental or other influences as a young child. Now I'd like to move on to the last clash about the harms and benefits to our society. Now their basic idea on this clash was that it can serve as a tool for rehabilitation, that the parents can have low possibilities to repeat their crimes and become criminals again. Now ladies and gentlemen, we have first questioned whether they have an actual clear link between those two. And second of all, even if so, is this something we should be actually encouraging? What is the basic purpose of prison, ladies and gentlemen? It's to isolate these criminals who have not fulfilled the social obligations from other people so that they do not spread a negative influence to the other remaining normal law-abiding citizens, ladies and gentlemen. Since when did we care for the rights, for the benefits, for the convenience of these criminals, ladies and gentlemen? And we have also shown you, even if we are going to do this, it's unfair for other criminals who do not have families, who do not have children. And also, if this is the problem, if it is for rehabilitation, then we should actually let these criminals have their own family inside in their bars, because this will actually become a more positive influence psychologically. And for these reasons, we are proud to oppose. Thank you.
Before going on to my speech, I have a little story to tell. It's a story about a little baby named Gwangju Jr. She was born from a parent who had committed a crime. Still, she lives with her parent. To be exact, her father. Why? Because her father was decided to be fit by a group of experts. We don't know who exactly these experts are. We don't know which guideline they followed. But somehow, these experts thought that her father was fit to be a parent who could raise babies behind the bars. But because of this government's new policy, she now lives with her mother, who has been an alcoholic and a shoplifter. Anyway, in her rooms, decorated with old pink wallpapers, she is sitting alone with the guard. Where is her father? Oh, her father is with other prisoners attending to other kind of prison rehab programs. So she's in her pink room with no friends. And when she goes outside, what she sees is a barren sand ground surrounded by gray prison walls. Unlike her peers, she has no daily visit to the bakery in her carriage with her parents. She has no neighbors to play with, and she has no other kind of people, adults who are, comparatively idealistic compared to what the adults that they have been meeting in. Now, I would like to name this story as the Pink Jail. And this is what the situation, and this is the future that would be created if teen government were to implement their policy. Now, their policy in the first place has several problems. They say that the parents would be able to raise their babies behind bars during their preschool years. So, according to their policy, if the criminal parent were to be in prison for a longer year than the preschool time, then they will be actually separating these babies or now growing to be children from their parents. They say that this parental influence is so great and so important, and I don't understand why they want to make a policy that separates these children when they go into school years. Even parents, even in elementary school years or junior high school years, would be very important. And they have also mentioned some kind of a special bond with biological parents. And what they have mentioned to us to be a foundation of this claim was that there were many psychologists and many statistics that told us that these biological parents are better than foster parents. Well, first of all, substantial number of our population, of our law-abiding citizens, are from foster parents. And we don't see. It would be very rude to ask them which source they got this information from. But I will at least like to ask Team Proposition of what foundation did these psychologists, as vague as the psychologists in their policy and decision-making process, what kind of foundation these experts took to conclude that biological parents are much better than foster parents. And second, we would like to also ask about this rehab rates that they have been talking about. Rehab rates. This policy has been implemented in very few countries, in very few states, for a very few years of time. Which means that if we want to actually see the rehabilitation rate or recommitting of the crime, then we should be seeing at a more longer perspective. Because if we're not doing that, then Team Proposition would be playing with numbers and playing with statistics. In their last claims, they said that just because these parents are criminals doesn't mean that they're irresponsible. Well, first of all, there's the high possibility of being so, and second, taking in that their policies' vagueness of which parent is apt or fit towards raising a children, then this would be very important matter for the children as well. And even if their claim were to be true, we will be sending out a bad social message. According to their policies, even a murderer or even a person who has prior record of stealing or doing something that is against the social virtues might be able to hold these children in their hands, in the same hands that they went against the social virtues and against the social morals. And that would be the reason why these policies should definitely not be implemented for the sake of the children and for the sake of our society. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the previous speaker of the opposition just came out and told you this hypothetical example of the Gwangju Jr. And I want to respond to that by saying that they're malignantly trying to misrepresent our policy from the beginning. Because in case of Gwangju Jr., first of all, the experts aren't really vague because they are psychological experts that have the qualification that determines the sanity of a person if they're emotionally stable or not. And second of all, if their mother was an alcoholic or a murderer, these experts would have certainly declared that the mother wouldn't be apt for the parenting of this child because she would impose a negative influence. And third of all, the baby wouldn't have to witness his father being in contact with other prisoners all the time because the facility would be separated from the prisoners. We require the opposition to listen more carefully to our policy before they come up to the podium and mock us by misrepresenting the case totally. As the government, we proposed the motion because we believe there is no more serious negative influence to babies than ripping them off from their mothers and fathers. And we believe this is really important because the biological parents, in contrary to the foster parents, are the parents who can be truly devoted and provide the affection, the care, the special bond that the babies need to stay on track when they grow up. This has been proven by psychological researchers. And the opposition reply speaker, the very last speaker of the opposition, for your information, came out to the podium and suddenly questioned the point that has been never raised with their 3 previous consecutive speeches. For foundation. Actually, this research has been done on the fostering homes that parents actually depend on to raise their child. And the research showed that foster parents are unable to devote the same amount of attention and care that biological parents are able to provide. Why? Ladies and gentlemen, this is simple. Because it's not their own child. And in the United States, it's been gigantically successful by establishing separate prisoner nurseries and allowing access from parents to the babies. This has been beneficial for mutually both parties. And this practicality issue has been proven by the status quo. So we don't understand why the opposition is raising a claim on that. Ladies and gentlemen, as the reply speaker, next I'd like to answer to mainly 2 questions in this debate. Who has been more reasonable? And secondly, who's considering the practical benefits in the case? To the first question, we can certainly say it's us, because we've said that the retribution of the prisoners are already taking place by forfeiting their freedom, but it's irrelevant with their qualification or their responsibility to treat their babies, because it's vital for the babies to have their parental care when they're babies in their younger stage, not until preschool, because that's when after they've established a significant bond with their parents and they need proper education. But when they're in the very primitive stage, when they're babies to 1, 2, or 3 years old, that's when they need their mothers and fathers to stay close to them to provide the emotional and psychological care that is really important. And we don't believe their claim that also it's not affordable, because first, in the status quo, the cost is already very low. And we're all only being practical. We're only being reasonable because the person who can raise babies has to sustain the cost of raising babies, whether they're in prison or not, because it's gonna cost them money anyways. So we're just requiring them to pay inside prison. What's the difference? We don't understand the purpose of their claim as well. The second question, who's considering practical benefits? We said that the purpose of prison itself serves as rehabilitation as well, which has been gigantically successful in the status quo because the recidivation rate has decreased significantly and the behaviors of these prisoners in these facilities have improved. That's serving the purpose of this establishment from beginning. In the contrast, the opposition has no examples whatsoever to prove their worries that babies would be negatively influenced in the practical case, when they have given no examples. And we've proven to you how in the status quo, if you're separated from the parents, it's 7 times more likely for children to commit juvenile crimes. We're being more reasonable. So ladies and gentlemen, in the broader perspective for the nation and in a more personal perspective for the happiness of the mothers and the babies, please vote for the proposition. 민사고 대 민사고 결승을 해서 기분은 좋은데요. 평소보다 좀 많이 못한 것 같아서 아쉬움이 많이 남네요.
저희도 뭐 확신은 없고요. 그냥 어떤 결과 나오든지 간에 일단 저희는 최선을 다했기 때문에 만족하고 있습니다.
제2회 광주광역시 전국 청소년 영어 토론대회 고등학생 국예부 1위.
The champions of the second Gwangju Youth English Debate Champions are
KUF 축하드립니다.
Congratulations.
네, 진심으로 축하드리겠습니다.
저는 저희 후배들이 이길 줄 알았는데 그래도 결과가 이렇게 예상외로 좋게 나오니까 되게 기쁘면서도 한편으로는 좀 더 잘할 수 있었을 텐데 한 아쉬움도 남네요. 내년에 또 꼭 돌아와가지고 내년에는 이거보다 훨씬 좋은 모습으로 다시 한번 또 우승하도록 하겠습니다.
이번엔 좀 아쉽다 생각을 했었는데 이게 또 7대2로 이겼다고 하니까 되게 놀랍고 그러면서 또 기쁘네요.
같이 디베이트했던 두 선배님들께 감사드리고 저희랑 결승에서 같이 붙었던 1학년 동기들 3명도 진짜 너무 많이 수고했고 같이 회식 갑시다.